is white ball cricket the future of the game? Because in a wide-ranging interview in the last week with the BBC's Test Match special, the ICC chairman, the International Cricket Council chair, Greg Barclay, has cast doubt over the direction of Test cricket, for women in particular, saying the traditional format will not, quote, be part of the landscape moving forward to any real extent. Now, Barclay, who's elected in 2020 after being director of New Zealand cricket for the last 8 years, the previous 8 years, also warned that there could be a reduction in the volume of Test cricket in the men's game in the future too.
To me, Test cricket is, something that represents the legacy and the history of the game. It's what makes the game, in many respects, unique, and we'd never want to lose that at all. We're fortunate in some respects that we've got other forms of the game that can help us sustain, particularly financially, Test cricket, because Test cricket is, with the exception maybe of one or two series, is effectively loss-making for member boards. But now that we've got the Test Match Championship, you've driven some relevancy back into Test cricket. You know, the Tests mean something now. So 10, 15 years' time, absolutely, I still see Test cricket being there. It may well be that there's less Test cricket. Some countries will just have to make room and play less Test cricket. But I think also some of the smaller full members will have to accept that from a resourcing point of view, that they're just not going to be able to play the amount of Test cricket that they wanted to. So I think we'll see a lessening maybe of that, 4 or 5 Tests a year maybe. Strategically, the way that cricket's going, there's no doubt that white ball cricket, short form cricket is the way of the future. That's the game that's sought after by fans. It's where the broadcasters are putting their resource. It's what's driving the money. Therefore, as the countries are developing women's cricket, to play Test cricket you've got to have structures domestically that enable you to play long form cricket, and they don't really exist in any of the countries at the moment. So I can't really see women's Test cricket or long form cricket evolving at any particular speed at all. That's not to say that those countries that choose to play Test cricket, a la Australia and England, can't do so, but I don't see it as being a part of the landscape moving forward to any real extent at all.
So a little more optimistic around men's Test cricket. There just might be less of it. But what of the future of women's Test cricket then? Will it survive? Australia World Cup winner Jess Jonassen reacted on Twitter saying, well, it won't without genuine support from the top. She says, disappointing to see those comments. The hunger and drive are there from multiple countries, regardless of some significant hurdles that need to be overcome by some. It should never be solely about money. Well, that's Jess Jonassen. I mean, never mind surviving. I mean, women's Test cricket's actually had something of a revival, you could say, in the last couple of years, with Australia, England and now India playing one-off tests as part of multi-format points series, which is a concept that was first brought in for the Women's Ashes. Now, a number of those matches have been televised and they've provided some cracking viewing with tight, intriguing contests, even though they've all ended in draws of late over what is a scheduled 4-day match. Brett, since 2017... we've had Australia, England, India, as I mentioned. South Africa are going to face England later this month in their first test since 2014. The women want to play and want to test themselves in the ultimate format, don't they?
Absolutely, and it's not nice to see a sort of indifference about the future of women's Test cricket when there are so many, including the players, that are so passionate about it. It's noting, of course, that there are still no red ball pathways for players in places like Australia and England who do play women's Test cricket occasionally. The counterpoint to this, I actually enjoy the fact that these Test matches are played by players that are established white ball cricketers. For example, I was commentating in Canberra the Ashes Test. England are, I think, 5 or 6 down, needing a runner ball to stage a successful run chase, and I thought, well, thank goodness it's Nat Siver going out to bat, because we know she can tonk the ball around a bit. If we had a Test specialist out there in that scenario, I'm not sure we would have got the same sort of finish, which really encouraged the appetite for more Test cricket. So it's a strange balancing act. I like that Test matches are still a novelty on the calendar, and I would also be mindful of making some of those nations, like the so-called Big Three, too strong, while other nations get left behind. If they say that Test cricket isn't a priority in lieu of helping other developing nations simply get up to speed in the other formats, then to some degree I understand, but it would be nice if they can find a way to do both, of course.
Charu, as Brett has said, no red ball cricket is played anywhere in the world in the women's game. It is all about the white ball game to develop cricket. But then ultimately, if players want to have aspirations, then is too much emphasis being put on revenues as to whether, test and money-making ventures rather than actually what the cricketers want and, not quashing aspiration and ambition?
Well, listen, I mean, I don't mean to be, excessively lighthearted here, but I also want a mansion of 10,000 rooms. It's not possible. What does the word economics mean to people? Can people understand that the world is essentially market-driven? Now, these are the
But then
important
we'd have
things.
no men's tests either, would we? In some places.
I've got to preface this by saying that, listen, I personally love Test match cricket. We've all grown up on it. But if that's the way the game is evolving, that is the way the game is evolving. Either the cricketers run it for themselves, get all the revenues, organize all the matches, or let people who are the custodians of the game understand where the commerce is going. If the commercial paths are all towards white ball cricket because that's where the revenues are coming in from and that's what people would like to support, then the game has no choice, really. We can't hang on to the past. I mean, we can't say, I love a horse cart ride, so we should have only horse carts instead because they're more, environmentally friendly, And so the world moves on. And cricketers, particularly from a certain era, have to realize that. I mean, I love it for heaven's sake. I'll say it again before I get trolled or whatever. But the world is moving in certain directions and cricket needs to move in that direction just to be able to be relevant anymore. Because you talk about England, Australia, maybe India. But, I mean, do we want to really restrict it and constrict it into a 3-4 person or 3-4 country game again? It's all about, expansion, isn't it? And if white ball is the only way, if not the easiest way to expand, then that's where the world of cricket will necessarily go. I mean, whether you like it or not.
Well, I feel as if the women's game is evolving backwards in a sense because they're starting with white ball cricket and actually moving up towards the test game. And rather than thinking of test cricket being something in the past for women, I actually rather feel as if playing a one-off test within a multi-format series is something actually quite futuristic. It's quite a modern way of presenting test cricket. But I'll tell you something that Sourav Ganguly said, and of course he holds a lot of power, as president of the BCCI in India, said on Twitter, whatever format you see, whatever the colour of the jersey you wear, none beats such a game of test cricket. No comparison. Let's keep this format the pinnacle. Now, admittedly, I'm pretty sure that he wrote that in reference to the men's test just finished at Lord's rather than in response to Greg Barclay's comments. But I don't know, what should determine the pinnacle of the sport, Brett? I mean, do we want Test cricket to be the pinnacle? And if so, what defines that?
The reality is it depends who you're playing for. And I suppose every young Australian and England cricketer talks about playing in the Ashes and how special that is. I suppose not every player across different nations get the opportunity to play in that event. Sort of depends. The World Test Championship is a relatively new advent, and I suppose that is something to aspire to as far as the pinnacle and having that final test match to determine the world champion. It depends. And the reality is, in some countries, it is going to be, the pinnacle is going to be playing potentially a white ball series, winning a World Cup or a T20 World Cup. It just depends on where you are. It's no sort of one size fits all.
Well, Alison, yes, different countries have different values, I suppose, for test match cricket, for one-days, even T20s. But where does the game really want to go? And if you take a look at, in a macro sense, from 100,000 feet up, and if you're responsible as a custodian of the game, you want it to spread. You want more countries. You want more competition. You talk about series, and yes, I agree. There's a one-off test, and the whole multi-format test series that you talk about. That's fine, but it's still between very few countries. If you want more countries, there's for now. Well, for now, but I mean, time is finite in a year or during a series. So these long series are also not likely to continue because you'll have shorter series. South Africa coming to India for 5 T20s and so on and so forth, rather than these long 2-month series, because that's once again very limiting. Australia, England play 2.5 months. Great. But that means that very few countries can play with Australia and England because they're playing so much together. So, time's finite, money's moving to a certain direction. The game will move there if you want it to expand. We can't keep seeing it from our narrow, old legacy angles.
Yeah, I'd like to think that with T20s and white ball cricket bringing people in, that the opportunity to be exposed to following a longer form game with the ebbs and flows, and we always talk about sort of that game of chess. I mean, it's the enticing nature of a test match and the storylines of the drama unfolding that develops over a longer period of time that gives ultimately, I'd like to believe, fans as well as players greater ultimate satisfaction. And T20 cricket, 100 ball cricket, whatever it might be, is very, you're in, you're out, you get your quick hit of entertainment. But then, who can really recall particular moments in one-day matches? I know I really struggle, but then it's about really what do the consumers want? And that's what the Chiefs will look at in terms of money, I suppose.
Alison, let me ask you, why would England have gone in for this huge
The 100.
change in the game by getting the 100 if Test match cricket was so enjoyed and so pushed by all the cricketers? Because they want new people coming in, because the commerce is leading them there. Quite simple.
But they do want those people to move forward to getting involved in tests. Yeah.
Well, you can't have everything then. This is not utopia. I mean, you can only pay a little bit. Like I said, time is finite.